Wonderful. Wow. You did send out the slides though, right?
Yep, I did.
Yeah, so I do have them already.
I made a change,
Oh,
so use the,
well, fine.
so use my,
Yeah.
told you were gonna need a dongle. It
Well,
would have been rude of me to show up and say, we don't need your dongle.
Well, it's happened before. Wouldn't be the first.
Oh, that's how you plug that in. I was really at a loss of how that was gonna get plugged in.
We'll get this TV fixed.
How was your day?
Productive until I tried to place an order.
Oh, golly, I'm sorry. Sorry.
I was going to purchase and start a new Audible book.
Yeah,
It's 49 hours. So I put it on my wish list. I'll think about it.
Christmas cake.
oh, shucks. Hey.
Were you-
Don't.
All right, there you go.
Unless you need somebody else sitting by you. Okay.
Right.
Wow, thank you. Oh, can I peek? Can I peek?
Yeah, it's not your Christmas present. You can have it, but it's we share it if you want or share it.
Yeah, we'll share.
You'll get a Christmas present.
Oh, it's so sweet.
I'm glad to see they're individually wrapped. I mean, that's how the Girl Scout.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, we got a little girl across the street. It's like, wow.
Take two. You're a large person. You can absorb the calories.
Yeah, that's all. I just absorb the calories.
Very good.
Bill, you ready?
Thank
Oh.
you.
Bam.
Whoops.
You took that out.
Oh, it's okay. I will just leave it actually.
Okay.
Now that it's down there. Hey, hi.
She's so fresh up.
Hi. Yeah, traffic was a booger, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yes, it was terrible.
Thank you.
Hot garbage.
Whatever that is.
It must be, would you say hogs?
I said hot garbage.
Oh. I bet there might be several things going on.
Oh, yeah.
Are these hog drops? Where do your?
No, these are just, these are to keep my mouth wet. They're actually xylitol drops.
Uh-huh.
So you can't have them anywhere now around a dog because they are toxic to dogs.
Yeah.
But they're great at stimulating your salivary glands.
Yeah, I
tend to
use,
get dry when I talk.
Oh, okay. Cause I use the spray and then the one you use for night. I haven't seen that brand.
It's a much better product.
Did that one last a while? I'm seeing.
A good while. The ones I have to use some for overnight that actually.
Yes, that's what it's,
stick
that
to
one.
your
Yeah,
teeth.
I put it up here. Oh, you put yours there. I put mine up here.
Yeah. Well, I have a night guard, so I can't put it up here.
You use a night guard up top?
Mhm.
Almost nobody does that. That's really
They're
interesting.
crazy.
I have, mine's on the bottom. And the reason I know that not many people use do a top one is because they made a top one for me by accident one time. And anyway.
Aren't you treating on?
Yes.
I love mint, but I can't, for some reason in all the products, toothpaste and all of the stuff. Well, this I have frozen, that's why my lips are right now. But because of that, I've had this for like 5 years. Spots just kept peeling and peeling and peeling. So first they had to use a cortisone chapstick.
Yeah.
Dr. Dan's. And then I kept asking about it because and she goes, oh yeah, you can keep using it.
Which one? I'm sorry, you're right.
That's all right. Sorry, excuse me. World Introduction to this 2023. That's the only one that has the year in it.
Perfect. There you go.
Here you go.
Oh, night show.
Just let me peek and see what that's the one that has 2023 in
Yep.
it. Groovy. Okay.
But they're little boxes.
What do you need?
I just got something for them.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh, what? It's
Cool.
dictating. No.
Pretty good.
What have I done?
Hi, Miriam, just checking to make sure you got the email that has the Zoom link.
Hi.
Oh, here's somebody coming.
Okay.
Admit.
Because we sit on.
Will you have Jane Weir's telephone number on your phone or? Would you just text her or
She's
call
coming in
her
right here.
and make sure, oh, wait, Jane Weir's coming in?
Or no, sorry.
Yeah,
Someone
no,
else.
no, just make sure Jane knows that that just came through,
They said Miriam.
if you can, because I don't have her telephone number with me here. Thank you so much. And here, and I see you're logged on. There you are. All right, bye-bye.
The earrings are cute, Trisha, those like cups with peppermint.
Yeah, like hot chocolate.
That's
Yeah.
huge.
What is it? Good.
Bye-bye.
Good to see you back. How's your dad doing?
I think he's doing all right.
I've got one already.
Oh, you guys haven't.
Girl Scout.
Oh, Rick.
across the street. I'm gonna pass. I've
They're good. Did you have one?
several of it.
Could be odd.
Aha, the truth comes out.
Yeah. We had the part of the season when the Girl Scouts sell candy. The rest of the year they sell
Jenny,
cookies.
we see you, but it looks like you're locking up.
Keep moving.
Yeah, there you go. Now you're moving. Jenny, can you hear us?
Jenny, can you hear me?
Santana and Miriam, can y'all hear us?
Judy,
Microphones are on. Be able to.
She's probably on the phone with Jane Weir.
Joanna was looking, I sent her the link, so she got in.
You're not dialed in yet,
Okay,
but I saw you sent her the link.
okay, so you should be
Okay.
able to.
I also sent out another link.
Okay.
What'd you say?
No, I also had sent out another link.
Oh.
So he emailed about an hour or 45
Gotcha.
minutes ago.
Gotcha. I'll let Rick get back in and then we'll start.
Will there be a handout?
Nope.
Well, then can I borrow the paper? I meant to bring it and I
That's okay.
first and that was,
I know I've kind of got the Sunday morning group trained that there will be a handout.
Yeah, you have.
I
had two.
well, we'll see how much I write.
Miriam, hey.
Hello, I called Jane, but she did not answer. I just
Okay.
left the message.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for doing that. I appreciate it.
Hi, Bill.
Miriam,
Either of these notepads.
I have this. Thank you though.
Okay. That extra notepad, if anyone would like. Get pins as well.
I have the note.
Is Rick coming back in?
Yeah, he is.
Well,
Down.
you just go ahead and If we're ready to start, then start. What's this?
It's recorded.
Yeah, let's dive in, because we've got a lot to cover. We've got the whole Roman Empire to cover tonight. So welcome to a course that I have entitled "In Those Days," and obviously drawing the title from Luke chapter 2, verse 1. In those days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus. So what were those days? That's what we're here to learn about. What was the world into which Jesus was born? And we're going to spend this week and next week and the following week, 3-week course, examining that question. And you can see from this slide, there's no exhibit at the Carlos Museum. There was an exhibit at the Carlos Museum back in, I want to say it was 2008 or 9. And that's when I originally designed this course. And it was intended to be presented in one day, one morning, and then we went and saw the exhibit in the afternoon. And everything that was in the exhibit is going to be included in the course itself. We will see everything that was in the exhibit. Hey, y'all. And one of our bad boys acting up. And so the next 3 weeks, we are going to be delving into what did the world of Jesus look like? And we're going to look at some important artifacts that help us understand that. So, but before we actually dive into the material, I would like everybody to have a chance to introduce themselves and to say just a little something about you. And since we're thinking about Jesus being born, where was Jesus born? Don't think too hard.
Oh, Bethlehem.
Where was I born?
Then I'm going to ask you to tell us, where were you born? And I will start. I am Mary Elizabeth Ellard, and I am looking forward to covering this material again with y'all and helping you learn more about the world into which Jesus was born. Because when we understand the world into which Jesus was born, we can understand our own world in comparison to and alongside the world into which Jesus was born. And I think his message becomes more relevant to us when we understand that. And I was born at Georgia Baptist Hospital. So let's start with the peanut gallery at home on Zoom. D Stone, would you go first?
Elizabeth, I am so embarrassed about. I cannot.
Hello there. I was born in Kansas City, Missouri.
I'm not alone.
Wait a
Just a
minute.
minute. Jenny, what, you need any help?
Information about it.
What's this? Oops.
You can hear her.
Can you hear us?
Jenny, here's a suggestion. I would suggest that you turn off your video. It looks like you may be locking up. If you turn off your video but leave your audio on, you may find that your connection is better.
I don't think she can hear us.
No. You could mute her.
All right, go ahead, D.
Yeah, go ahead, Dee.
I'll be texting with
Thank you.
Jenny.
Okay. I was born in Kansas City, Missouri.
And tell us a little something about yourself.
The fascinating thing is that I was born to an unwed mother, and I was adopted within a matter of days because the obstetrician was the uncle of my mother that took me. And I grew up in the happiest, most wonderful family, and only just this year met some of my birth relatives.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Yeah,
How exciting.
yeah, it
Wow.
is. It's awesome.
Wow, thank you for telling us that. Cool. Miriam, you're up. Tell us something about yourself, what you want to get out of this course, and where were you born?
Well, I was born in El Salvador, Central America, of course. Mary Elizabeth was my Sunday teacher at Drew Hill Presbyterian Church, and we enjoyed it. The classes and the fellowship. Always I got, don't tell the preacher, but I got more from class. But that is what I can tell, and I happy to be here and take advantage of her knowledge and the group knowledge, you know.
And it's a great group to be part of. It really is. Thank you, Miriam. Is Jenny on yet?
I'm working on it.
Okay. Tricia, you're up.
Okay, I'm Tricia Johnston and I was also born in Kansas City, Missouri. So, don't want to copy Dee, but so I'm hoping, I just love history and but I also want to, especially this time period, so cool. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna try and get Jenny to at least say her name and where she was born. Or,
It's related.
yeah,
Okay.
huh? You can only see my thumb.
Yep, yep.
Go ahead, Jenny. Go.
Yes, 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 yeah. No, no, it's not.
No.
All right,
Okay.
Look
Bruce,
up on the right. Look.
I was born in Huntsville, Alabama.
You were born what?
Huntsville, Alabama.
Oh, the Space Museum.
That's why my dad he worked for Boeing in Seattle when my brother was born and then moved to Huntsville to work in the space industry. And we ended up in Colorado most of my life, which is where NORAD is. But we moved around quite a bit.
Cool. Cool.
I'm Laurie Wise. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, but we live mostly in Montgomery. So my father worked for the state. I went to Auburn and Alabama.
They allow
I did teach a special ed for a while, but most of the time I worked for the state in the Department of Education.
Glad you're here.
Amanda Timberlake, born in New York, New York. And I work at Life University. Hopefully will retire in the next few years and looking forward to this class.
Cool. Who are you?
I'm Fred. I'm Bill Ellard. And I guess I'm particularly interested in the Romans, which would be good since that's who was there at the time.
Yep.
So,
Okay, so
and I was born in
speaker.
Gainesville, Georgia,
Yeah.
home of the mighty red elephants.
So I'm Rick Zaleski. I was born in Colorado Springs at Fitzsimmons Army Hospital. My dad was in the Air Force at the time. And we lived next in Huntsville, Alabama, because he worked for Lockheed. So
Let's just see, we made a reverse.
here's an interesting factoid. He always told us that the FBI would hunt him down, rip his face off, and put him in federal prison if he ever divulged what he really did.
You ever what?
If he ever divulged what his real job was. So he worked in the super secret part of Lockheed, but we only learned that when on 60 Minutes one evening, the guy who was credited with inventing the stealth stuff.
Inventing
Rich.
the what?
Stealth fighters
Oh, okay.
on TV revealing all of the secrets because he wrote a book. And Dad goes, I was in that program. How could he be on TV?
Maybe his face has been ripped off.
Took a long time. We always knew there was something more to the story, but he was very good about keeping secrets secret.
Even
Yeah,
his
I wanna-
brother didn't know.
I love learning about everything that you have ever shared with us. So.
Well, I'm Charlene. I'm Rick's other half, Selesky, and I was born at St. Joe Hospital
Okay.
in Atlanta. And I'm interested in being able to understand or, put together the pieces and understand that time period. I love history and understanding the geography and the whole.
We've never been there.
We've never been there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotta fix that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Miriam, you are absolutely right that Mary Elizabeth is the best teacher ever.
Stop,
Yeah.
stop. And Dukes. Oh, Miriam, you raised your hand.
Yes, because she knows.
Unmute.
Having tip. Okay. Unmute. Am I there?
Yes, you are, and you are now here.
Okay, good. Glad to be here.
Tell us where you were born. That's what we're sharing with each other.
Okay, Atlanta,
Which hospital?
Piedmont.
We've
We're
got
going around the
so-
circle.
3 different hospitals.
Yep. So Piedmont, Georgia Baptist, and St. Joe's represented here. Woohoo! Miriam, did you need to say something?
I'm sorry, Jane just called. She doesn't have the link.
Okay, we'll get it to her.
Okay, thank you.
Tell her to check her email.
I told her.
Okay. Let's make sure that goes out. And
Was it who didn't have it?
Jane Weir. And so since Brooks is doing that, I'll tell you about Brooks.
Okay.
Brooks is unfortunately stunted at birth. He's never overcome it.
I can't hardly
It
hear.
should have been 7-1. I mean,
Brooks was stunted shortly after birth, and he's never grown to to his full height. Those who don't know Brooks, how tall are you?
I am 6'6".
6'6". Imagine how tall he could be if he was actually fed properly.
Yeah,
Started
drinking coffee at a young age. They said it would stunt my growth.
And
There we go.
and he is emerging as a really wonderful preacher. And I'm so proud of him for that. I am. Is that Jane Weir who just logged on?
Yes.
Yes, Jane, we see you. Jane, would you unmute yourself and say hello to the group? Tell us your name. Tell us something real quick about yourself and where you were born.
Unmute first.
Yep, Jane, you're muted. It's a great picture of you. Oh, nope. You're still muted, Jane. Jane, do you know to go to the little icon of the microphone in the lower left?
I know how to do that.
There you
but
go.
Yay.
Did I make it?
Yes, you
Yes.
are here. Jane,
Oh.
tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself and where you were born.
Okay, I'm Jane Weir. I'm going to confess my age of 74 years. I have 2 sons and 1 grandson just turned 1 year old. And let's see, I'm from Poughkeepsie, New York. I'm retired from Atlanta Public Schools after about 22 years. And let's see, what else? I live a happy life. I'm a yogini. And,
Cool.
and I love to do the sound at Druid Hills Pres.
Awesome. Awesome. We are so glad you are here and thanks for persevering to get in the room. Santana, it is your turn to introduce yourself. Tell us where you were born and a little something about yourself.
Yes, I'm Santana Herrera. I'm Miriam's husband, unfortunately. But I was born in El Salvador, of course, not too far from where Miriam was born. Of course, everything is small over there, you know, it's like 1/3 of Georgia, the whole country. But anyway, I was a prisoner of the month at Jackson Security Prison. And no, I'm sorry. No, when I heard Bill's voice, who is my very good friend, so I got excited. So I want to join you. So I'm excited about so much wisdom present in a single place right there in that room. So I want to learn something myself.
Cool. Well, we're so glad y'all are here. Truly, truly. Well, let us dive in. So will you click to the next slide? So it says today's, but it's actually our course goals are going to be really to, first of all, to understand the two major forces that shaped and ultimately destroyed Jesus' world. And the first of those is Roman imperial rule. And you'll see that I call it a costly cosmopolitanism. And we're going to get into what I mean by that. Costly cosmopolitan. And then our other major force that we're going to look at mostly next week is going to be Jewish religion. And what was Jewish religion in the time of the Second Temple period, during the time of Herod's temple, of Jesus' life. And you'll see I've put in, are we screen sharing?
No, because I'm on a different computer. I can do that in just a second.
Sure. And if you have your slides that I sent you, you can look at those as well, but we're setting up to screen share. You can fix anything. That there was tremendous internal conflict in Judaism during the Second Temple period, to the point that some people would say there was not one Judaism, but there were in fact many Judaisms. I personally don't go that far, but I will say that there was tremendous disagreement on what it meant to be Jewish.
Nothing's changed.
Right. It's exactly. And so that those are going to be the two big forces at work that are going to shape Jesus' world. And then if we had the slides visible, we would see.
Calm down.
We would see that when I originally taught this course, we were going to apply that to things that we saw at the Carlos Museum exhibit. By the way, you can actually go online to Amazon.com and still buy the catalog to that exhibit at the Carlos Museum. You have to hunt for it, Cradle of Christianity. They have only one copy available. It's $65 and it'll cost you an additional $8.40 to have it shipped to you. But you might be able to call the Carlos Museum and see if they have any in the back. But we are going to see all of those items in our slide presentation.
Good job.
So you won't miss anything. Next slide, please, sir.
All right.
Is the Carlos Museum here in Atlanta?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
it's over on the Emory campus.
Okay.
Yes, it has a fabulous, I will say Syro-Palestinian ancient Near East exhibit. Fabulous. And it was a special exhibit that they had.
So is it part of the seminary or is it just there?
It's part of the university.
University.
Yeah, the Carlos Museum. They are one of the finest collections of Egyptology in the world. So of course, we're going to begin with Pauline the cow. You'll understand shortly. Pauline the cow here was President Howard Taft's milk cow. President Taft, he was president from 1909 to 1913. And President Taft was the last president who had livestock of his own that he brought to the White House. Yes, brothers and sisters, until the year 1914, if the president of the United States wanted cream in his coffee, he had to bring his own milk cow. Now, you can see that Pauline is not standing on the lawn of the White House. This was actually the Department of the Navy's headquarters. And Pauline had wandered over to the Department of the Navy's building. Now, can you imagine this happening today? Right?
About her getting run over.
Right. She'd get run over. She would be stopped by White House security. They would check her udders for weapons. She would have a security detail of her own, right? She'd probably be microchipped. And of course, you know, the White House now is completely barricaded off. Unless she was a fence jumping cow, she never would have gotten out. And what would they have done to keep the Rose lawn clean, right? This would not happen, right? The FDA, USDA would be having a duck. It's a very, very different world that Pauline and President Taft lived in than our own world. Let's look at the next slide. When President Wilson was president, they were trying to cut costs at the White House. And so he thought, let's get some sheep. They may safely graze and keep our lawn mowed down. Again, can you imagine the Secret Service going through the wool? Ma'am, have you got any weapons hidden in this lanolin coat of yours? Very different world. Similarly, just as our world, just over 100 years later, is incredibly different from these worlds, think how different our world is from 2,000 years before. People are always people, I grant that, but the world is very different. Also, the world of the Bible, from one end of the Bible to the other, is also very, very different. We have this feeling that when I open this book, I'm opening it to the ancient world, and nothing could be further from the truth. There are multiple ancient worlds. Next slide, please. And I want us to think just a moment about the world as it existed under King Saul. We're going to get a picture of just what the world of Jesus looked like by first creating a sense in our head, but what did the world look like when Saul was king? When Saul comes to the throne, first king of the United Monarchy, he rules from roughly 1020 to 1000 BC, right? Let's look at what the world looked like. Let me get some Bibles for folks. Y'all know that there's always got to be Bibles, right? We look at 1 Samuel chapter 10. Ooh, Amanda gets gold star. She's on Bible. In 1 Samuel chapter 10, Samuel anoints Saul. So he becomes king in 1 Samuel chapter 10. In chapter 11, he faces his first crisis of office. This is like younger George Bush's 9/11, Ronald Reagan's strike of the air traffic controllers. It's a first crisis of office. And the crisis begins there in chapter 11, verse 1. And the people of Ammonite, the king of the Ammonites, besieges the Israelite city of Jabesh Gilead. And they say, okay, you have to surrender to us, or we're going to kill you. But if you surrender to us, what are they going to do according to verse 2?
Gouge out their right eye.
Gouge out their right eyes. Oh, that's not a very good deal. And so what do they do in verse 3 and 4? Somebody read that to us.
The elders of Jabesh said to him, give us 7 days respite, that we may send messengers through all the territories of Israel. Then, if there is no one to save us, we will give ourselves up to you. When the messengers came to Gilead of Saul, they reported the matter in the ears of all the people, and all the people wept aloud.
Thank you. Now, first question. Does Saul have a sophisticated intelligence network?
No.
Is there anything like a FEMA or 911? No. And the response of the people is what? They're just weeping and wailing. Is there any immediate program of action to help the men of Jabesh Gilead? No, there's no standard operating procedure. It's just nothing. Now, somebody read for us verses 5 through 7.
I'll do it.
Thank you.
Now Saul was coming from the field behind the oxen, and Saul said, what ails the people that they are weeping? So they told him the tidings of the men of Jabesh. Jabesh.
That's fine.
And the spirit of and the spirit of God came mightily upon Saul when he heard these words, and his anger was greatly kindled.
And verse 7.
He took a yoke of oxen and cut them in pieces and sent them throughout all the territory of Israel by the hand of messengers, saying, whoever does not come out after Saul and Samuel, so shall it be done to his oxen.
And the rest of the verse there.
Then the dread of the Lord fell upon the people, and they came out as one man. When he mustered them at Bezek, the men of Israel were 300,000, and the men of Judah 30,000.
Thank you. Now, what was Saul doing?
Plowing the field.
Plowing the field. Can you imagine Joe Biden on a John Deere tractor with a little straw hat out there on the Rose lawn? And somebody from the State Department comes running up, Mr. President, the Russians have just invaded the Ukraine. No, not at all. Is this a sophisticated state?
No.
No. Is there a standing army?
No.
No.
Does Saul feel like he can just, give an order? No. What does he do? Yes, he threatens everybody with an inch of their life. I mean, make no bones about it. Killing your oxen, then you can't plow the fields. You can't bring in a crop, right? He threatens everybody, and he gets a huge army. Understand, these numbers are supposed to sound huge at the time. 300,000 from Israel, 30,000 from Judah. How many men fought in the American Civil War? 3 million.
Oh, wow.
Okay. This is a tiny little number, and yet it's intended to sound huge. Right? Is this a big world that Saul lives in? I mean, how much distance are we talking about? It's about 120, 140 miles from north to south, about 40 miles in width.
Mhm.
It's a tiny little, I mean, you can send pieces of an oxen out to everybody and they'll still look like pieces of oxen if they get there.
Could still have them for dinner.
Yeah, there you go. Put them on the Barbie. It's a tiny little world. Next slide. Now let's look at the world of Jesus. And let's look at that beautiful passage. We've read it, heard it a billion times. Somebody read for us Luke 2, 1-4. And let's remember that this is roughly 1,000 years after Saul. Luke chapter 2, verses 1-4.
In those days, Caesar Augustus issued a decree that a census should be taken of the entire Roman world. This was the first census that took place while the Q was governor of Syria. And everyone went to his own town to register. So Joseph went up to Nazareth, town of Nazareth in Galilee, to Judea, to Bethlehem, the town of David, because he belonged to the house of and line of David.
And throw in 5.
Okay. He went there to register with Mary, who was pledged to be married to him and was expecting a child.
Thank you. Now, what kind of world is this? Is this a little world or a big world? Where is
Bigger.
Yeah, where is Caesar?
A long way away.
He's in Rome. And yet, does he have to slaughter oxen? No, no, he simply speaks a decree. This is very like God in the first chapter of Genesis. He spoke and it was so. He sends out a decree that everybody in this neighborhood,
Everybody what?
everybody in just my neighborhood should be enrolled. You know, the whole, and their perception is it's the whole world, right? Should be enrolled, census, or the good old KJV taxed, because make no bones about it, they're not counting people so that you can be represented in Congress, right?
Go government.
Now, notice, is there an existing bureaucratic infrastructure?
Yes.
Yes. Well, how do we know that?
Messengers went out to all the cities.
Yes, and who's governor of Syria?
Q.
Quirinius, right? Q. Is this their only one census ever happened?
First census.
The
of
first
this
one, right? First census under Quirinius. So this is something that happens periodically. And do we get any inclination that Joseph entertained the idea of not complying?
No.
Right. Even though he's got a pregnant fiance who's about to pop. There was no picking up the phone and calling and saying, well, could I defer my service because my girl's about to, drop a baby? Oh, sure, we'll reschedule you. No.
Yeah.
You go. So this guy in Rome says a word, and this guy in Nazareth picks upheaves his life and goes to answer that man's edict. Notice too, when back in Saul's day, that event about Jabesh Gilead and the Ammonites surrounding them, what is it that initiates Saul's action? Does Saul make a policy decision, or is he responsive to the call of the people?
People were crying.
The people are crying. So that what happens, that government at that point is run from the bottom up. In Luke chapter 2, it's totally top down. Caesar is large and in charge. Next slide, please. Oops. Now, there has been a great parade of superpowers in the ancient Near East. First, there was Egypt, right, from whom Israel is going to be freed through the Exodus. Next, Assyria, that's going to destroy the northern kingdom of Israel and take those people off, scatter them about. So they're now the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Then Babylon's going to come along. They're going to conquer the Assyrians, and they're also going to conquer the southern kingdom of Judah. They're going to send those people into exile in Babylon. Then the Persians are going to come along and conquer the Babylonians and send the Jews back to their homeland. And then this wacky guy named Alexander the Great is going to come along in the 300s and get the idea that he wants to conquer the world. He's going to basically do it. And Greek Hellenistic rule is going to be the name of the game from 331 BC, roughly till 167. And then finally, Rome is going to appear on the scene. Let's, next slide. So we got to deal with Hellenism. Alexander, like I said, he gets it in his head. He is going to conquer the world. He sets out basically in 333, and by 332, he has captured Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is now under Greek rule. And within a year, he's going to take Persia. This is important because Alexander is going to bring with him Koine or Koine Greek, which is the common man's Greek. This is not the Greek of Plato, Aristotle, Sophocles, Homer, Socrates, all the intelligentsia. This is Joe Blow, Greek soldier on the street, Greek. It's the difference between someone who speaks like this, thank you very much, and somebody who talks like this, or yo, like this, right? This is important, click, because the New Testament will be written in Koine Greek. First of all the writers know it, and secondly, they can expect that their readers know it, whether they're Greek or Jewish. Everybody speaks, and a lot of people can read Koine Greek. Next slide. Additionally, it is the language of the Septuagint. The Septuagint is the first translation of the Hebrew Bible into any other language. Scholars are going to gather in the city of Alexandria in Egypt and translate it into Greek. And that translation, the Septuagint, is going to be the Hebrew scriptures that the church uses. The church largely does not use Hebrew, the Hebrew Bible. It's going to use a Greek translation. So for example, whenever you read in Matthew, Matthew frequently will say, and this happened to fulfill blah, 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 blah. And he quotes from the Hebrew Bible. He's quoting from the Septuagint, from the Greek, not from the Hebrew. So this is really going to become the core language of the church. Next slide. Also, as Alexander conquers the world, he's going to foster a cosmopolitan worldview. And yes, that's redundant, but it's still important. Let's start with the worldview.
Wait a minute, can I back up?
Yes,
a second?
yes.
The last thing about the translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, is that kind of like we have an African daughter, and when the French came over, they required them to learn French, and that was their business language. Is that kind of how this was? It's like that, and they weren't allowed to speak.
No, they are allowed to speak it. But the fact of the matter is everybody's bought into the culture, the predominant culture, which is Hellenist.
Okay.
They can still speak Aramaic all they want. They could read, but we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Some places.
It's kind of like English is predominantly the business language.
Yes.
For right now.
Yes. And it used to be French, right? They're simply going along and getting along. This is the language of the world. It's a different world than we Americans live in. We live in a monolingual language, monolingual world. Not so back then.
Thank you.
Surely, it's a good question, and we will cover that. What is a worldview? So that's how you view the world, right? But back up. You have to have a concept of the world. You can't just think in terms of my county or my neighborhood or north to Jabesh Gilead and south to Bethlehem. You've got to think in terms of a world. And the world is a way, not we here are that way. And those people over the mountain, they're another way. And those people over the river, they're another way. We, the world, are a way. And I can look at that a way. And I can do that because I am cosmopolitan. Cosmo, all that is, cosmos, politan, a citizen. I am a citizen of everything that is. That idea does not exist until Alexander's soldiers bring it across the globe. Next slide. Now, this is Alexander's empire. Notice in the upper left, you'll see a kind of little green spot of land. That's modern day Greece, Hellas, Hellas, Hellas. And you'll notice, which way does his empire go from there? Does it go east from there or west from there?
South.
East, goes east, all the way to the Indus River Valley in India.
It's this.
Right. There's Greece on the far left-hand side.
And this just zoomed in.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's here.
Right. Correct. So the empire, his empire extends east. There is nothing in Europe worth conquering.
Barbarian.
Just barbarians. And that's in fact what they called them, because to the Greeks, that this foreign languages just sounded like bar. We would go wah, 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 bar. That's where the word barbarian comes from. They care nothing about going west. The action, civilization, and money is all to the east. So that's the way that Alexander heads. And he conquers, you notice, he conquers everything that I mentioned of the superpowers, Asia, Babylonia, Persia, Egypt. He conquers all of them. It's the largest empire the world had seen to that point. And notice it's got kind of three chunks, right? It's got a chunk that is in Asia. Thank you.
Here.
Thank you, Vanna. It's got a chunk that's kind of down in Egypt. And it's got a chunk that's modern day Turkey and Greece, Macedonia, right? What is the connecting point between those three chunks?
Israel.
You got it. That is never a good thing to be a crossroads between major sections of an empire. Next slide. and it's going to get worse. So Alexander died very quickly into his campaigns, 323, so about 10 years into his campaigns, supposedly of a broken heart because there was nothing left to conquer. And he divided his empire among his 3 generals. So each of those 3 chunks that we looked at are going to be divvied up. And the Antigonids are going to get Macedonia and Greece. The Ptolemies are going to get Egypt, right? And I said Elizabeth Taylor, right? We've all seen Cleopatra, and she was a Ptolemid ruler, a Greek ruler in Egypt. And the Seleucids, who get Syria, which was basically all of that eastern portion of the empire, of the Greek empire, although the very farthest eastern regions are no longer going to be under their control. The Seleucids are going to have, for the most part, they're going to have control of Israel, Palestine, Jordan, modern-day Syria. They will be known for brutal oppression, and I do mean brutal oppression. Antiochus Epiphanes, everybody's supposed to say, boo, right? To this day, his name is always booed among Jewish audiences because Antiochus Epiphanes does want to exterminate Judaism. It's illegal to speak Hebrew. It's illegal to own a copy of the Torah. It's illegal to circumcise your sons. It's illegal to gather for Sabbath. It's illegal to go to the synagogue. It's, you name it. It's illegal to have a mezuzah on your doors. It's illegal to wear a yarmulke or your prayer shawl. You name it. It's illegal. He is actually burned in effigy to this day among Eastern European Jews. And by 166, elements within Judaism have had enough. And the Maccabean family, it's actually a mom, the husband was a priest, and he's killed by these Antiochus Epiphanes forces, and his sons, Judas and all his brothers, revolt against the Antiochus Epiphanes family, against the Seleucid controllers of Palestine. And Hanukkah actually celebrates that victory. And for a very brief time, from 166 to 160 BC, roughly, there is an independent Jewish state. That will not happen again until when? 1948, exactly. Next slide. Now, the Maccabees, well, we should think, wow, that's great. Independent Jewish state, great. They get to be Jewish again without people killing them for it. Not so much. The Maccabees, who are also called the Hasmoneans, they established an office of king priest. So they roll together temporal power with religious power. That is a big no in the Hebrew Bible, right? There was always the kings and separately the prophets and the priests. So when they did this, they hacked off both the priests and the rabbis, the entire religious establishment. People who might not normally get along are unified in the fact that they don't like the Hasmoneans. Additionally, of course, what is any palace without an intrigue, right? So there's also some internal power moves going on. And all of this is going to erupt at Passover in 63 BC. Remember that when Jesus is executed, what season is it in the Jewish calendar? Passover. And Passover recalls a liberation from slavery and oppression. And remember that Pilate is worried about the possibility of riots. This is why there's a precedent for riots breaking out, revolutionary riots breaking out at Passover, because everybody's thinking about liberation. Well, when this happened, the Roman general Pompey honestly just happened to be in the neighborhood. And he was suppressing pirates and, oh, by the way, along the way, annexing kingdoms for Rome, which is still a republic. God bless you and keep you. And so the Hasmoneans are no fools. They recognize that they are besieged by some pretty powerful enemies. And so they invite Pompey in. Come as a peacekeeper. settle the riots. Because they know if they invite him in, hopefully Rome will keep them in power as client kings. And in fact, that's what happens. He conquers Jerusalem, claiming to be a peacekeeper, and he puts a high priest ruler in power on Rome's behalf as one of the Hasmoneans. But the real power behind that guy is his top general. That guy's name was John Hyrcanus II. You don't need to know that. And the power behind that guy was his top general, Herod Antipater. You want to take 3 guesses who his kid is? Herod the Great. Herod the Great. Next slide. Now, meanwhile, back on the boot in Italy, Pompey has to go back to the Roman Republic. And I just put in there, those are the dates of the Roman Republic. Right?
Oh, it's like, dang, he lived a
long time. He did. He was he's health conscious, exercised a lot, ate chia seeds. And civil war breaks out in Italy. And that's why Pompey has to go back, because Julius Caesar has done the great no-no. He has taken his army south of the Rubicon River. That's the river that marks the northern border of Italy. And he has brought his armies south of that river. That is by definition, an assault on Rome, an attempt to assert control over Rome. And of course, that's exactly what he's doing. And he and Pompey fight it out. Pompey's killed. Caesar declares himself emperor. The Senate, the Roman Senate, has had it by 44 BC and has him assassinated. We all know et tu, Brute, right? His friend Brutus is the one who finally does the killing stab. Well, whenever somebody gets assassinated, I don't care where we are on the globe, there's going to be people fighting for power. And Mark Antony, Richard Burton, right? Richard Burton and Octavian, Roddy McDowell, are going to initially avenge Caesar's death, right?
What would you do if you had a class of 20-year-olds?
I'd be lost.
I know. I say
I'd be lost.
Class, and they look at me like, who?
I know. My heart goes out to you. I had the same thing happen when I at work with my little 25 when them too. They usually know more. Oh, let's get it. But the dogs are clueless. So they avenge Caesar's death, and then of course they turn on each other, right? And finally, what happens is that Octavian does beat out Mark Antony at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, and he begins his reign. Next slide. As Caesar Augustus, right? This is the guy from whom the decree goes out. Now, bear in mind, right? There's been revolt, uprisings in the Near East. There's been all kinds of civil war, people vying for, are we going to have a republic? Are we going to have an empire? And if so, who's the emperor going to be? Been going on for years in the West. Caesar Augustus comes into power and brings with him a sternly enforced Pax Romana, peace, law, and order. He brooks no trouble. Interestingly, he's very tolerant of local culture. He does have, I will say, a macro view. He has a world view. He's not worried about little stuff. Just don't revolt and do pay your taxes, and he's good with you. He establishes excellent, safe roads for trade and communication. So you can actually ship goods from Persia to Greece, to Rome, and even further to Spain, to Northern Africa. Suddenly there is trade, commerce, exchange of ideas, goods across the world. Urbanization. Cities thrive under this guy, right? To have trade, you've got to have hubs of trade. You've got to have cities, right? With bureaucratic infrastructure to help maintain the empire. He dies in AD 14. And the Senate of Rome, remember, they just had Caesar assassinated a few decades before. But now all of a sudden, they're hip to this idea of an emperor. They name him Caesar Augustus. His name was just Octavian. Caesar means ruler or emperor. The word Kaiser in German derives from this. Augustus, that's the Latin for big guy emperor. And they say he subjected the whole wide earth to the rule of the Roman people, the whole wide earth. Again, that worldview concept.
Did they say that after he died?
Yeah. They hailed him as savior, not a savior, capital S, savior. And his heir, Tiberius, was very quickly referred to as the Son of God. Does this remind you of something in Luke? What does it remind you of? Look at chapter 2, verse 10. And the angel said unto them, fear not, for behold, I bring you good news of great joy, which is to all the people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David
A savior.
a Savior, who is Christ the Lord. And look also when Mary is approached by Gabriel in chapter 1, and she's like, whoa, dude, I'm not sure what you're talking about here. The angel says to her in chapter 1, verse 35, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the child to be born will be called Holy, the Son of God. Luke is appropriating known political language associated with the empire here. Next slide. Now, like I said, Caesar Augustus has a big view of things. He's not going to sweat small stuff. Now remember, all that list of superpowers that I listed, Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Persia, the Greeks, everybody except Persia has had major problems with the Jews. Major problems with them.
Like what?
Well, the Exodus under Egypt, revolt under Assyria, revolt under Babylon, revolt under the Greeks. These people simply will not wear the yoke. They won't do it. So he's no fool. It's like they want little concessions, fine. Temple tax. Everybody had to pay a temple tax to sustain the temple. Fine, it can stay in Jerusalem. No other tax in the Roman Empire is allowed to stay in the native country. All other taxes go to Rome. Now, they still have to pay taxes. We'll talk about that. But the temple tax itself is going to stay in Jerusalem. Temple funds and sacred texts that are in the temple protected by law. And these decrees actually come from Caesar Augustus personally. A decree went out. Assembly in synagogues without harassment. We all take right of assembly as commonplace and given. Here we are. We're gathered here together. That is not normal in world history. And it certainly wasn't normal under Rome. In order to gather, you had to have a permit. You had to be recognized by Rome as a group that has a legitimate reason to get together. Synagogues, blanket approval. If you're a synagogue, you're good to go. Sabbath observance is honored by the courts. Can you imagine picking up the phone, calling the Fulton County clerk and saying, I'm sorry, I can't show up on such and so a day. It's a religious holiday for me. Would they reschedule your court proceeding? No. All someone Jewish had to do was say, I'm sorry, that's the Sabbath. I can't come. Oh, no problem. We'll reschedule. And also, by the way, Jewish men were generally released from military service because they would observe the Sabbath, and that disrupts an army. So they didn't have to do military service. Other monotheistic quirks. For example, there would be no standards with images brought into Jerusalem, right? No, that's because that's graven images. That would offend the Jews. The Romans had no idea why that was so offensive. What's the problem? It's an emperor. It's an emperor image. It's an emperor image. Well, yeah, it's an emperor image. Yeah, it's offensive. Why? It's an emperor image. They didn't understand it, but they're like, okay, y'all feel strongly about it. Fine. Just pay your taxes and don't revolt. Also, they allowed the Jews to maintain the inner court of the temple as a sort of sancto sanctorium. No Gentiles were allowed to enter under pain of death. In all other matters, Rome reserves the right of execution unto itself. These are the only terms in the entire Roman Empire where they were allowed to execute people. This is way better than they had under the Seleucids. Way better. Next slide. Now, Rome made some concessions to the Jews, but Jews are also going to have to make concessions to Rome. Remember, I said it is a costly cosmopolitanism. There is a constant military presence. Look, somebody read for us Matthew chapter 5, verse 41. Matthew chapter 5, verse 41.
And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles.
Thank you. It was a standing rule that any member of the Roman army could conscript any Roman subject to carry his pack for 1 mile. Probably usually little boys got pulled into this. And you can very much imagine little boys being little boys, staking out the 1 mile mark on the roads out of town. And as they would get to that 1 mile mark, there was something that they knew where it was. A little stone and a twig bent a certain way. It was their sign. We're at the 1 mile mark. And they would, one imagines, put that pack out. And that poor Roman soldier knew it was going to happen, right? After a while, word gets around. And so probably at some point, there was some Roman soldier. I know the 1 mile mark is coming along. I'm following behind this kid because he's about to drop my pack and I don't want to spend the next half hour brushing the sand out of everything and repacking my gear. But this little kid kept going. And the guy thought, he's trying to suck me in. We're going to get 10, 20 paces out. And then he's going to drop the pack. And then he goes, maybe 100 paces, maybe 200 paces. How about a 1/4 mile? Kid never drops the pack. Eventually the Roman soldiers walking along like this, like, what is this? They get to 2 miles and the little kid turns around and says, my mommy doesn't let me go further than 2 miles. Here's your pack. Have a nice day. What in the world? What's your name? Jesus. What's yours? This probably was an experience from Jesus' childhood. And it was a very typical experience. And it's a mark of that constant military presence that was constantly needling them. Every little boy grew up to remember, yeah, that Roman soldier made me carry his pack. Daily sacrifice in the temple in honor of the emperor, paid for by the emperor. Now that sounds great. It's just in honor of the emperor. It's not to the emperor, and the emperor paid for it. But still, it is having to do something in the inner sanctum of the temple for this pagan guy hundreds of miles away. It's a daily reminder of who's really in charge. Rome controls the office of high priest. You have to get the approval of the high priest of Rome to serve as high priest. So that's always somebody in their pocket. And they also physically control the vestments, the ephod, the gowns, everything like that. They have physical possession of it. Taxes. That's one thing is throughout the New Testament, right? Throughout the Gospels, taxes. And remember that if you have to pay taxes, that means that that entity owns your labor for which you are paying your taxes. Subject to Roman rule through client kings and military governors of varying competence and humanity. Next slide. And one of those was Herod the Great, the son of Herod Antipater. He became governor of Galilee when he was just 16 as a law and order man. We're going to deal with all this revolting and stuff. But he was so brutal in trying to establish it that the Sanhedrin, which is the ruling Jewish body down in Jerusalem, not up in Galilee, down in Jerusalem, tried him and condemned him in absentia. They can't do anything about it, but they took a very firm stand against him. Meanwhile, the Roman Senate names him King of the Jews. Remind you of anything? Right? And he's actually going to conquer Jerusalem with Mark Antony's help in 37 BC. Now, was Mark Antony able to establish himself as emperor of Rome?
No.
No. Even though Herod sided with Mark Antony right up until the very end, when Antony is completely defeated, right, and Richard Burton falls on his own sword, right? Well, you would think that Octavian, later Caesar Augustus, would have done what to Herod for that? Siding with his enemy.
Minimum depose him.
Yeah, kill him, right? There's no retirement plan for kings, right? Right? You're dead. But remarkably, Herod showed such bravado in dealing with Octavian after this. Octavian said to him, "You served my enemy to the bitter end." And Herod said, "That's right. And now I will serve you to the bitter end." And that bravado endeared him to Octavian. And so Octavian says, "Groovy, you're my man now." And that secures Herod's rule. And he is now going to begin an ambitious Hellenizing, Greekifying building program. Next page. He's going to build a series of wilderness fortresses, Herodium, named for Herod. Next slide. And you may remember in 2007, his tomb was actually discovered there at Herodium. Next. He built Masada. We think of it as the fortress, right? That's where the Zealots had their last stand, but it was actually built as a wilderness fortress palace for Herod. Next slide. Caesarea Maritima. The eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea has absolutely no natural ports. Everything it's like the redneck Riviera there in Western Florida, right? It's just sandy beaches, no deep ports. So he actually is going to build a sea break wall, dig out we have ants.
Yeah, I know.
He's going to dig out a port, and he's going to name it in honor of his good buddy Caesar, right? Caesar Maritima is seaport that belongs to Caesar. Next slide. He's also going to build the city of Sebast. Sebast is the Greek equivalent of Augustus, big guy. Next slide. And of course, he's going to build Herod's temple. He intended it to become the center of religious, economic, and political life in the entire Eastern Empire. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. It was covered in so much gold that when the sun hit it just right, it was visible for miles. Incredible complex. Next slide. We see this in the Gospels, in all of the synoptics. They carry forward this verse from Mark 13:1. As Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and large buildings." Next slide. Huge stones, huge building. This is the largest stone found to date in the temple complex. It's under the ground. Over the last 2,000 years, a lot of dirt has piled up around the ruins of the temple, and a lot of it is under the ground. This largest stone is the size of a city bus. I'm not talking a minivan. I'm not talking one of those little Clifton shuttles. I'm talking a MARTA bus. Huge stones. Next slide. And let's look at Jesus in the temple, right? This is obviously an artist's rendering of what it would have looked like. And it did look like that. But at the same time, it was never fully completed. It was always under construction. So whenever we read in scripture about Jesus being in the temple, we should imagine, in our very 21st century minds, we should imagine jackhammers going, and men in hard hats walking around, and cranes going. There is constant construction going on at the temple. And of course, the temple is central to so many stories about Jesus and so much of his life, starting on the 8th day of his life. He is presented at the temple when he is 8 days old in Luke chapter 2 for the redemption of the firstborn, as mandated in scripture, right? This is when Simeon and Anna recognize this is the Messiah. So that is done at the temple. Then Jesus returns to the temple, we know, later in Luke chapter 2, when he is 12 years old, probably for his bar mitzvah, right? Also at the temple, right? Long before the movie Home Alone, right? He's left at the temple. He is, oops,
Sorry.
That's okay. He's often depicted as teaching in its precincts. Now, in the synoptic gospels, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we get the sense that there's only one trip to Jerusalem, one final fateful trip at the end of his life. That's a narrative device that is not historic. The Gospel of John tells us Jesus was going to Jerusalem all the time. It makes sense because Jewish males were required to go to Jerusalem for the pilgrimage festivals. That's Passover and Pentecost and Tabernacles, Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuot. So he would have been going to Jerusalem for those festivals at least 3 times a year. Right? And so we see that in the Gospel of John again and again and again. He cleanses the temple, this dramatic act, which Mark places, and Matthew and Luke, at the beginning of the Passion Week, right? So that final fateful trip. John tells us that it was actually at the beginning of his public ministry. He cleansed the temple. He's going to issue warnings of its destruction. It's like, yeah, you get big stones. Yeah, they are now. They won't be. And then, of course, he is under accusation there at the temple in his final trial. So this place figures centrally in his life. Next slide. We do have some remnants of the temple still. This is what's called the trumpeting stone. It was discovered in 1880 in the rubble below the southwest corner of the temple as it stands now. So if you back up a slide for me, yeah, and run, if you would, put the thing around the arch below the rounded arch. Yeah. So it was found below there. So you can see it's a long way down from there down to ground level. Almost all of that was under dirt until the late 1800s and excavations started. So we can go forward. That trumpeting stone found there at the beneath the southwest corner. You can see it's a cornerstone of some kind, right? And it's called the trumpeting stone. It only has a couple of words on it, but it describes how to trumpet. Why do you need a stone on how to trumpet? The historian Josephus tells us that at the southwest corner, to begin and to end Sabbath, someone would blow the shofar at the southwest corner of the temple. So again, whenever Jesus is there, he would have heard that to begin and to end the Sabbath. You can imagine that now as you think about Holy Week, and the women retire. They can't go to the tomb. They retire to observe Shabbat, and they do it, and they can hear that shofar blowing. Next slide. Another stone that we have, no Gentiles allowed. We only have the gray portion. We know the entire text, but we only have the gray portion of this block. This was placed at the inner sanctum, the court of the Jews. And the last word on there in Greek is thanaton. Thanaton. If we have any Marvel Comics fans,
Down.
Thanos means death. No Gentiles are allowed. It reads that any Gentile who is found in these courts will be put to, well, death. Let's look over at Acts chapter 21. Verses, let's actually read 27 to 29. Somebody read for us Acts chapter 21, verses 27 through 29.
When the 7 days were almost completed, the Jews from Asia who had seen him in the temple stirred up all the crowd and laid hands on him, crying out, "Men of Israel, help! This is the man who is teaching men everywhere against the people and the law and this place. Moreover, he has also brought Greeks into the temple, and he has defiled this holy place." For they had previously seen Trophimus the Ephesian with him in the city, and they supposed that Paul had brought him into the temple.
Thank you. And all the city is aroused. Thou shalt not bring Gentiles into the court of the Jews on pain of death. Next slide.
Sorry.
That's okay. So Herod is a compulsive builder. We've talked about this. He's going to build his series of wilderness fortresses. He's going to rebuild large portions of Jerusalem and Judea after a major earthquake in 31 BC. But the problem with all that is it has to get paid for. And he does not pay for it out of his 401k. He heavily taxes the people of Judea. Next slide. He's not a nice guy. By the time he dies, he's really, frankly, a paranoid and ruthless maniac, to the point that his good friend, Caesar Augustus, made a joke about him, that it is safer to be his hus, which is Latin for sow, than to be his huios, his son. Safer to be his hus than his huios, his sow than his son, because he executed two of his own sons because he was afraid that they were after his throne. They probably were. We all know what happens in the Gospel of Matthew, right? The Magi come in the 2nd chapter, and they come seeking who?
King of the Jews.
King of the Jews. And he's a little bit upset about this because the Roman Senate said he's the King of the Jews. He finds out from the scholars that the Messiah is to be born in Bethlehem. He doesn't know himself, right? He does not know scripture. He's not a good Jewish boy. He has to ask. He finds that out, and what's his solution?
Kill all the Jewish
Kill all
boys
the
under a
Jewish-
certain age.
Exactly. The slaughter of the innocents. That's his solution to the problem. We have no non-canonical confirmation of this event, but it is completely consistent with the Herod that we know from history. For example, in his will, he ordered that all of his enemies would be executed on the day he died because, and he says this in his will, I want to make sure that somebody cries when I die. He left his kingdom to his 3 surviving sons. We know how that worked out under Alexander, right? It's going to end up with a lot of rivalry and that kind of thing. And so revolt and unrest result throughout the region when Herod dies. The largest of those revolts is in Galilee, led by a guy named Judas, the Galilean. And he's actually mentioned. That revolt is mentioned in Acts chapter 5. You turn over to Acts chapter 5. The Sanhedrin is trying early Christian leaders, Peter and John, and they're thinking about what to do about them. And in verse 37, Acts chapter 5, where are we? There we go, 37. The leader Gamaliel, who actually was Paul's teacher, right, is concerned that they not overreact. And he says, after Judas the Galilean, he's already talked about one revolt. Now he's going to talk about Judas the Galilean, arose in the days of the census. The census, remember the census? Drew away some of the people after him. He also perished, and all who followed him were scattered. If you get rid of the leader, you kill the movement. Don't worry about these guys. You've killed Jesus. Don't worry about his followers. The movement will die. That revolt under Judas, the Galilean, had centered at the city of Sepphoris, which was Herod's administrative, read tax, center in Galilee. It was put down by the governor of the time, Varus, who destroyed the city of Sepphoris, completely destroyed it, and crucified 2,000 rebels and enslaved the rest. Next slide. So that's going on in the background when Jesus is born. We have here the remnants of one of those rebels, Yohanan, son of Hagkal, that is his heel bone pierced by a nail. It is the only physical evidence of crucifixion known today. And it was in an ossuary, a bone box of the family. You might remember hearing the expression, he was gathered unto his fathers, as a way of talking about someone dying. They would lay out the body in the grave and let it desiccate and deteriorate to the point that there was really nothing left but bones. They would gather the bones up and put them in the bone box with everybody else's bones. So they gathered him unto his fathers. This nail, you can see it's got a hook on it. It probably hit a knot in the wood and bent, and that's why the family could not get it out of the heel bone. Next slide. Sepphoris. So Varus is going to rebuild it. Well, actually, Herod's son, Herod Antipas, is going to rebuild it after the destruction of the city. He's going to rebuild it as a Roman city. What do I mean by a Roman city? Roman, think of as a brand. You go into Chick-fil-A and you know that they're going to be waffle fries. You go into McDonald's and you know it's going to be those little string fries, right? You know what to expect by the brand. A Roman city was always going to have public lavatories, an aqueduct system with potable water. It was going to have public baths. It was going to have some kind of arena or theater. It was going to have a main road called the Cardo, like heart, Cardo. And then it was going to have streets perpendicular off of it. Okay? And it was going to have a tax center. You knew what was going to be there. Accommodations would be there. This was a mixed Gentile Jewish city. It's an eclectic city. Think Austin, Texas. Right? It was the ornament of all Galilee, is how it was referred to. And according to tradition, it was the home of Mary. It's about 3 miles northwest of Nazareth. Who grows up in Nazareth? Jesus. Jesus grows up in Nazareth. It's probably where Joseph came looking for work when he returned from Egypt, right? He comes back to Egypt. Let's go take a look at that passage. Look in Matthew chapter 2. In verse 19, Joseph gets word that Herod has died, and an angel tells him it's okay to go back to the land of Israel because the king who was trying to kill him is dead. So he takes the child and his mother, goes to Israel, but he heard that Archelaus, one of Herod's sons, is ruling over Judea in place of his father. Archelaus, acorn didn't fall far from the tree. Nasty, awful, horrible human being. Joseph says, no, not where I'm going to raise my kid. And so he goes north up into Galilee to Nazareth. Now, think about it. What was Joseph's profession? He's a carpenter. A carpenter wants to live somewhere where there's a lot of what? Wood. Does he care about the wood? That's the lumberjack. Building. Construction. What's happening in Sepphoris?
Building a whole city.
Building a whole city. A Roman city, not some podunk little backwater town. A Roman city. A lot of work for a carpenter. Nazareth, only 3 miles away. Good place to settle. Live in the burbs and work in the city. And if you're a little kid growing up in the little town of Nazareth, where do you want to hang out?
No city.
In the big city. It's only 3 miles away. Probably closer than that if you cut across the mountain, right? Probably where Jesus spends a lot of his childhood, in this very urban, very cosmopolitan city. Next slide. Just shows you what the current excavation looks like. You can see there's an upper city to the left up that flight of stairs. That main cardo you can see running through the middle of the picture. You can see squares behind it dug in the earth. That's where active excavation is going on. And you can see that Nazareth is just right on that next hill. Next slide. This is the main cardo looking south. And look what's on either side. Mosaic sidewalks. Have you ever seen a mosaic sidewalk? I have not. That's expensive. That's she. That's downright bougie, right? And then notice in the background that there's a modern structure and it says Nile mosaic. It's been built over a mosaic to protect it. There are mosaics everywhere in Sepphoris. Next slide. This is the so-called Dionysus mosaic. It's about 10 by 8 yards. It's huge. It's in a Roman villa up on the high point of the city, and it's in the triclinium, the dining room. Triclinium means 3 couches. You can see couch, couch, couch. So 3 where people could stretch out and eat a meal together. And notice Dionysus, that's a Greek god of partying, right? And notice in the bottom right that pretty woman's face. Next slide. Wherever you see mosaics, a lot of mosaics, what do you know has got to be there? Could just anybody afford to have these put in? Well, there's a lot of wealth and there are a lot of artisans, right? Sepphoris was a government and private enterprise hub. It is at least a bilingual city, right? You've got Greek speakers, you've got Jewish speakers. They've got to be able to communicate with each other. And they probably also all speak just enough Latin to interact with the tax collectors and the bureaucrats. There's a theater there, right? So Jesus may not be getting first run Broadway hits, but he is getting them when they go on the road. And he is getting to see regular festivals and theatrical events associated with pagan holidays. There's an upper market and a lower market. So there's a lot of commerce going on in this city. And there's this beautiful, the Mona Lisa of the Galilee, as she is called. Artisans, prosperity, culture.
Does she show up in other pictures?
No.
No, just
this one. Next slide.
Detail.
This is from one of the many synagogues in Sepphoris. There are many, many synagogues. Beautiful mosaic of this is actually just a 7-branched menorah. Next slide. And this is a mosaic wall floor combination. It's actually from a little bit later. The city of Sepphoris is going to be around well into the Byzantine era, but it's simply a very well preserved rendering of something that is seen throughout Sepphoris. And here it's Alexander the Great, action hero. You can see in the next to the bottom panel there, he's fighting a lion, right? Big tough guy fighting a lion. So flip back one slide. We've got a Jewish menorah. And next slide, a pagan action hero. That's the kind of city Sepphoris is. Very multi-ethnic. Next slide.
Is it still called Sepphoris?
Yes. Yes. And there are excellent digs still going on there.
Oh, yeah, excellent.
Digs.
Oh, digs.
Yeah, digs. One by Duke University and one by James Strange. He's passed away, but he's University of Florida at I forget where he was, but yeah, two separate major digs going on there.
Michigan State.
No. Anyway, so this is another mosaic map in Madaba, which is in modern day Jordan. Thank you. And I want you to notice, so east is up in this mosaic map. So west is down. So at the very bottom, obviously very little of the map remains, right? That's the Mediterranean Sea at the bottom, just little snippets of it. So all of this that you're seeing in the map is just to the east of the Mediterranean Sea. That large body of water in the middle where there are two boats is the Dead Sea.
Okay.
And then, and you might even be able to see, well, we'll see in the next slide. Now look below the Dead Sea to number 1, and you see that's an oval. Go to the next slide. See, it's to the right there. That's Jerusalem. We know it's Jerusalem from the Byzantine period because to the very far right in the bottom of the oval is the Church of the Nativity. I mean, excuse me, the Church of the Crucifixion. The Cardo, central single long street through Jerusalem, which had become a thoroughly Roman city. And if you look, you can look up and see the Jordan River. You can say it's coming out of or going to the Dead Sea, and see that the fish are swimming up out of it, trying to get away from the salty water.
Sure.
That's okay. You might see just below the Jordan River, you can see a bunch of palm trees. You see the palm trees, Brooks? Can you? Yeah, there you go. And a city. And the Greek there is Jericho. Jericho, right? City of palms. Let's go to the next slide. Color enhanced. There's Jerusalem. And straight to the right of Jerusalem. There you go. Bethlehem. Bethlehem. And underneath it, the Greek Ephrathah. Micah 5:2 says, and you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, are not such a little town, because out of you will come the King of Kings. Notice that map goes from the Mediterranean across the Dead Sea, and it's only a teeny part of what was a much bigger map. They understood how big the world is, but what was at the center of that world? The city of Jerusalem, and right next to it, Bethlehem. That is the world into which Jesus was born. Next week, the religious culture of the time.
This was awesome.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Elizabeth.
Thank
Good
you
to see
all
you,
for
folks.
coming. Thank y'all. If you have any questions, feel free to email those to me or call me. I'm happy to chat. If anybody wants to stick around and ask questions, you're welcome to, but I want to respect everybody's time.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all. It's great to see y'all.
So Joanna never did.
Yes, she did.
Okay, good.
Good.